we have Grace. Thank you. And so we have Grace Florjancic. She's the agricultural master gardener and home horticultural coordinator for Oregon State University Southern Oregon Research and Extension Center. Lynn established and runs the native plant nursery at Jackson County Extension Campus. And so Grace has been so wonderful to be here tonight and present the
While you can finish saying that. Micromanager.
I know, this is great. Just what I needed. And so here is the presentation handout, which Rachel has put a QR code, which is awesome. So you can download the presentation here, or you can use that URL as well. And is the presentation in this presentation?
It is up under PowerPoint.
Okay.
And I can take over if you want.
Okay, I can.
Yeah, I can get it.
You can get
we
it?
just need to stop sharing this and then share the new one.
Okay.
All right, take it away, Grace.
Thank you, Grace.
House this way, does it come back or all the way over?
Yeah. I think
Oh, got it back.
If you take a picture of it, you can go to it also, because we're gonna go away from it. The QR code. And it looks like this. See that?
I minimize that. I can click share screen.
Then you gotta. Oh, okay.
Oh, I gotta go to get the. Is it sharing the correct thing? Okay. We are all set. Just double check in the chat and make sure that we are all set.
All good here.
We're all good.
All good.
All right. So I am Grace Florjancic. I am the Master Gardener Coordinator at SOREC, Southern Oregon Research and Extension Center. Lynn is one of our superstar Master Gardeners who does a lot of work with native plants, but unfortunately couldn't be here with us tonight. So I'm giving her a presentation on her behalf. And so she created this and I just threw in a little edits here and there. So this presentation, Why Native Plants, is based off the work of Doug Tallamy. If I can.
Arrows?
There we go. So if you haven't had a chance to read his books or see his talks, definitely check it out. He's a really great resource for pushing native plants and bringing them up to where they should be. So what is the problem and why should we care? A lot of people have been noticing what we're calling the insect apocalypse, a lot of reduction in insect populations. There's a large loss of native habitats across the country and globally. We're losing our birds along with our insects and our habitat. And along with all of them, other forms of wildlife, mammals, reptiles, amphibians. So what is really causing all of these problems? There's a lot of factors, some of them much more prominent than others. Agriculture is a big one. We use a lot of land to feed ourselves, and we don't always make that land dual purpose for us and our native wildlife. Roads, they're hazards. I'm sure you've seen a lot of deer become victims of this. There's some really cool land bridges that are being made over some highways to reduce some of that hazard and protect wildlife. Unnecessary lights. We have light street lamps everywhere that really can impact migrations for birds. And tens of millions of acres of sterile lawns globally. I believe the US has about 40 million acres of lawn. So all of this and all of the human activities cause widespread destruction and displacement of our native plants. This is a photo from Lynn, a trip that she took driving from here to Corvallis. On the left-hand side, that windshield is covered in poor insect splatter. But then more recently, only had a handful of insects on her windshield. This is kind of some of the visual impact of that insect apocalypse we're seeing. Lower, vastly lower populations. And it's causing a shifting baseline where when I am younger than Lynn, growing up, I'm used to the photo on the right. I'm not used to seeing that photo on the left. I don't have memories of that. So my baseline for what is normal has shifted compared to Lynn's. But I have my own shifting baseline. Growing up on the East Coast, there were fireflies everywhere. Remember being really little, going out in the backyard, putting them in jars, releasing them at the end of the night. And now there's hardly any in our backyards, and they're mostly by the streams because of the way we've been maintaining our properties is just not good habitat for fireflies. So without all of these insects and all of the great things they do, we don't really have support for the rest of the food web. Plants are kind of the base, insects really come second, and those two things build up for all other organisms on the planet. So how can we turn this around? It's a really big ask, but today we're all going to learn how we can save the world one step at a time. You'll notice the pink one in parentheses for the dagger moth. That is going to be floating around next to a lot of different plants, and that's going to show the number of moths and butterflies that plant supports as caterpillars in their larval stages of life. So we do have good news after I shared all that kind of alarming bad news. We can work to reduce and reverse this insect decline and save nature and all of our beautiful birds in the process. We just need to shift our yards to look a little more like this. We've got a couple things blooming. We've got a diverse array of plants instead of what we're used to in the suburbs, which is sterile lawn, kind of our boxed evergreens that we hedge. And it's really causing a ecosystem collapse where we're not providing what insects need. So this is just a pretty picture of our, on this side, so let me see my notes. Of one of our natives that you can see it blooming right now, red flowering currant, very beautiful. One of the early flowers, important. And since we have a lot of land that we own, we can focus on what our own property has to provide rather than worrying about things that we can't really directly impact. So making it a more manageable problem for us to fix. So about 40 million acres of lawn. Ways we can get around that. Our native plants have grown alongside our native insects. As our plants grow, our insects evolve to be able to eat them. Our plants evolve to be able to defend themselves against our insects. So when you go out into the woods and you look up at the trees, they're not barren from all the herbivory from our insects. You kind of don't notice that there's caterpillars all over those trees in the wild. So, don't need to hit the microphone. 90% of the insects that are native to our area have developed a relationship with our native plants. They rely on them for reproduction. They rely on them for their larval stages of growth, or sometimes their adult stages for pollination. They are used to these very hungry caterpillars that are going to be eating and eating to grow and grow. So they're not going to be completely damaged like some of our ornamental plants that we take a little more detailed notice of and say, oh no, something's eating it. We want something to be eating it. So here are some 7 steps we can take to make a difference and help save our future of nature, all of those insects, all of those birds, everything building upon it. Step one, removing half of our lawn. This one always gets some people a little bit, my lawn. But when's the last time you saw someone having a picnic on their front lawn? I don't usually see that. Usually the backyard's more used for some of those social gatherings. You can still leave space for the kids to play, still leave space for the dogs to run, but maybe think about, do I really need this much lawn? What is it? When's the last time I've been in this section? When's the last time I've used it? They don't support our native insects. They're not really providing any habitat or food for them. They're not building and protecting our soil the way some of our native plants with larger roots do. And they cause a lot of waste with the pollution that's involved in watering them, fertilizing them, all that runoff, some mismanagement we usually have of them, pesticide applications, things like that. And it also leads to some air pollution because we use a lot of gas-powered lawnmowers, leaf blowers, things like that to maintain a pretty pristine lawn that doesn't necessarily need to be used in other habitat. So 45 million acres of lawn, that's every year 2 billion gallons of gas used for lawn equipment. That's 41 billion pounds of carbon emitted from leaf blowers and mowers. 13 billion pounds of toxic and carcinogenic air pollution. 100 million pounds of lawn chemicals, fertilizers, and 9 billion gallons of water a day across the country. That is a lot of water, especially when we're starting to see more droughts pop up in a lot of places. So being a little more mindful about how we do our landscaping, can have some nice natives with some nice pathways going through. You can convert your entire lawn if you want to get rid of 100% of it. Or you can keep some space, like on the left-hand side, that's usable for gathering, kids to play, dogs to run around in, and make nice beds full of native plants in a section that you're not using. Here is a good comparison of turf grass on the far left with its really little itty bitty baby roots. And we can see, so these are some plants from native prairies in the United States. Those roots get down to about, I believe it's 15 feet is the bottom of this chart. So they're doing a lot more for that ecosystem, letting water get down into the soil profile there, roots feeding other organisms that are deeper into the soil. Going to hold on a lot better for erosion control. Here's a good example of all of these roots that we could be having in our gardens and landscapes, but we don't always have those if we've just got lawn. So by removing half our lawns nationwide, we could have more native plant acreage than the Everglades, Yellowstone, Yosemite, Grand Canyon, Mount Rainier, Grand Tetos, Canyonlands, North Cascades, Badlands, Olympic, Sequoia, Denali, and Great Smoky Mountains combined. Our national parks have about 20 million acres, where we've got that 40 million of lawn. So that's about twice as much lawn across the country as we do national parks. So that's step one. Get rid of some of the lawn, ideally half. Maybe you can get rid of more. Maybe you still have grandkids, pets that need a lot more lawn. Can get rid of 25%, you know, baby steps, work our way there. Step two, as much as possible, get rid of those non-native plants and especially those invasive ones. Sometimes they can be a little tough to get with. On the very left is fennel. Lynn loves to grow fennel for food. However, it is invasive. So if you are growing one of those food crops that's invasive, be mindful, cut off the seed heads, don't let those seeds spread, be a responsible grower for it. And on the right is butterfly bush. Some of you probably very familiar with that story where we, as people in the horticulture industry, we get some nice plants. We say, this will be beautiful. It'll do really well in our environment. And then they escape our gardens and get out into our wild spaces and displace our native plants. And it's really unfortunate. Sometimes they're planted with good intentions, but they don't provide services that our native plants do. while it's beautiful nectar plant for butterflies, it's not a larval host plant for caterpillars to eat and grow on. So we're unintentionally causing all these problems. We've got ivy, English ivy, Scotch broom, there's English laurel, all these plants that we've got that are very pretty around our homes. Not very pretty when we want to go in our native spaces, and then we end up seeing all of these invasive plants. So if we can remove part of our lawn, remove our invasives and some non-natives, the next step is replace those with native plants. So here on our mock orange, we can see the number 4. So that mock orange species is going to support 4 different species of moth and butterfly. Those caterpillars are going to be able to eat that mock orange. So normally when we're thinking about our yards and landscapes, we want that to be pretty. We want it to maybe block out our neighbors. We want some nice, pretty focal point. And that's how we've been doing landscaping for a long time. But we're starting to shift that to what can we do to have more ecosystem services by including native plants, adding value to our food web, having more positive impacts on our water, carbon sequestration. I can talk today. Helping all of our pollinators, giving them habitat and food. All of these great things we can be doing, as well as having those nice decorative values, those nice screens to block out our neighbors, by just incorporating more native plants into our landscapes. Ooh. Another highlight of those root systems before compared to turf grass. Not going to sequester as much carbon with little itty bitty baby roots. We need some big native plants to get that job done. So they're going to be providing a lot of food and habitat for our insects, like the caterpillars that need those larval host plants to feed on. Some of our pollinators, like bees, need certain plants to be able to survive and reproduce. So we need to be mindful about who we're gardening for, a little bit ourselves, but also the creatures we live around us and alongside with. So our native caterpillars, they need to eat those native plants. Red twig dogwood, great for the gardener, very beautiful. Also can feed 54 different species of caterpillar. That's a big bump from those 4 or sometimes none if they're non-native and invasive. Caterpillars are going to be really punched into this talk because they're really essential for our birds if we want to keep our bird populations high. Got all of things like our titmice, our chickadees, our bush tits. We want to see these guys flying around, reproducing. And they get a lot of their food by the trees and shrubs where these caterpillars are, gleaning off those leaves, getting all of that good squishy caterpillar goodness to feed their young with. So these gleaning guilds are going to need a lot of food to feed their young. It wants to go to the next slide. There we go. So a chickadee weighs 0.35 ounces. That's about 4 pennies. You can imagine holding something feather light in your hand. It's going to need 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars to rear 1 clutch of young. That is a lot of caterpillars. So if we've got some native plants that are going to be providing a lot of food for a lot of different species of caterpillar, we're going to be able to raise a lot of birds. So if we want these guys, those nice little yummy snacks for the birds, we're going to need to provide habitat and food for the caterpillars to get those other organisms that we want to see out in the wild too. So why are we going to highlight caterpillars? They're beautiful. They've got some cool names. And really, the main thing is they're soft. They're squishy. That's going to be good for a baby bird to eat. They're large. You can get a lot of food packed in one caterpillar that you hunt. They've got a good amount of protein so the birds can grow and develop. got good amounts of fats, so that protein to fat ratio, good for those little babies growing up. They've got the carotenoids, which are gonna help get those colors in birds' feathers. And they're really easy to stuff down a baby bird's throat, very squishy and soft on that. They're kind of like little bratwurst. You can just shove it in the baby bird's mouth, and then mama bird goes, flies, and gets some more caterpillars to feed. So if we want the chickadees, we need the caterpillars. If there's no caterpillars, there's not going to be any chickadees. And if we want more than chickadees, because that really small bird took 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars to raise one clutch of young, that's one. We're going to need a lot more caterpillars because there's a lot bigger birds out there. We've got warblers that are going to glean off trees and shrubs like those last ones. We've got thrushes, got a little bit bigger. They're going to hunt for insects down in the leaf layer. Not going to use litter, fallen leaves, and trees and shrubs as well. Woodpeckers, even bigger birds, supporting our flycatchers. They catch things on the air, swoop and get them. But when they've got young, they're going to need caterpillars. So if we want to get all these birds fed, reproducing, keeping their numbers up, we're going to need a lot of caterpillars. And some of that, we need to think about vertical space as well as our horizontal space. Because a lot of gardening, we think, okay, spread out sideways along, but we need some taller things in there, trees and shrubs. So birds that have very different types of feeding can still get all the caterpillars they need. So not everything's going to be very happy with habitat that's low to the ground. For breeding birds, we want them to make nests, provide their food. Going to need some taller trees and shrubs as well. So the plant choice really does matter for getting these in there. We can do native ones that are going to have a lot of different species of caterpillar they support. Oaks are going to be great for that. They're a keystone plant. Does anyone know Romans keystones in the arch? If you pull the keystone away, it all collapses. And that's how it is in our ecosystems too. If you pull these keystone plants away, there's not enough food for these insects to support the entire ecosystem. And we start to see that collapse. Cherries, our native cherries are also a great one. Bitter cherry, choke cherry, Klamath plum. They provide a lot of food for a lot of different caterpillar species. Great for the gardens, got some flower and some fruit. I always love the bark texture for them. Great for the birds and other animals too to eat the berries. And for the Klamath plum, good food source for us too. Get an extra bonus. Whereas if we look at some invasive plants like Bradford pear, only supports one species of caterpillar. And when a survey was done over an entire tree, they only found 11 caterpillars on that one tree. Whereas if you have an oak tree, they found 400, 500 caterpillars on one tree before. So that's a really big difference. On a note of Bradford pears, my neighborhood when growing up, when it was developed, they put in Bradford pears because they grow quickly and they flower. And they were like, great, awesome, moving on. Well, down the line, now all the wooded areas around my neighborhood full of Bradford pears, which is really unfortunate, displacing some of the native trees that could be supporting caterpillars and thus birds and beyond. Instead, that area is stuck being saturated with trees that are not providing food for our birds and anything else that's going to eat caterpillars, some lizards and amphibians. Instead of Bradford pear, something like the black hawthorn, still going to get those white blossoms, but it's going to be providing food for 80 different species of caterpillar. It's going to produce some berries that other animals in our area are going to be able to use. Some invasives like burning bush only supports one species of caterpillar. So if we add these food sources for caterpillars to our urban and suburban ecosystems, they're going to be providing those caterpillars to have breeding birds because our songbird populations have been dropping and we want to keep those where they're at. So don't need to get rid of everything non-native. There are some things that are really pretty that we just love so much, near and dear to us. But in order to keep our bird populations where they're currently at now, not where they used to be, we need to aim for getting our lands to be 70% native plants to have enough food for all of those birds to survive and reproduce. So thinking of all the green biomass in your yard, if you kind of look at it from a bird's eye view, trees can be a lot of that biomass. We can get some things under the tree, depending on where you are, how much land you have. It might be difficult and got to work with what you've got, especially if you're in one of the fire zones. That can be a little more, have to be further away from your house to protect yourself. But doing what we can do to make our yards more usable for our insects, our birds, all of our critters. So making these insects and having habitat and breeding ground for them supports life for the rest of that ecosystem and that food web. So this mountain lilac hosts all of these beautiful butterflies. If we want to see them in our yards, in our gardens, out in the parks, we need to have food for them when they're caterpillars. A lot of times we just think about, oh, pollinators need flowers for the nectar. And we don't think about, well, they need to eat leaves to become butterflies. So feeding them when they're young is very important. So having a diversity of plants, having those keystone species of plants that are native are very important when we're thinking about landscapes. So if we plant a willow, that supports 312 different species of caterpillar. But if we add in another plant, like a cherry, adding that 200 plus that 300 that they're both going to individually support, we get 500. And if we keep adding different plants that support a wide variety of caterpillar species, we can end up having a yard that supports a couple, 1,000, maybe 1,500 different species of caterpillar. It's going to have a lot more options for the birds, a lot more species survival for all of our butterflies and moths that we want to see out and about. So when we're building our landscapes, we're basically building a bird feeder. It's one way to think about it. We get to decide, do we want an empty bird feeder or do we want a full bird feeder? If we plant natives, we're going to be able to support a lot more birds. We're going to have a fuller bird feeder. If we're doing something like an ornamental that's not native, while ginkgos are beautiful, they only support 4 species of caterpillar. So maybe just have one ginkgo be your focal plant and have a lot of natives around it to balance out having that mix of native and non-native. Nandina, I've had a fun time in the garden I used to work at trying to get rid of this guy because he does not want to go away, highly invasive across the United States. And there's some reports that might show that the way cedar waxwings eat by gorging themselves, they might over consume the toxins that are really mild in those berries that don't really impact other birds. So that's something, in addition to it being highly invasive, another notch on the list of why we don't really want Nandinas around. Instead, we've got some native shrubs like viburnums, very great. Oregon grapes, also a good shrub alternative. So when you can, choose natives, yes.
Talking about the Oregon grape, it hybridizes with the Nandina. They're very closely related.
So the Oregon grape and the Nandina hybridize, I did not know that. Oh man, another thing to look out for. So there are some ways to find native plants, and especially in the area, there's a lot of nurseries. Plant Oregon, the Jackson County Master Gardeners have a native plant nursery. Shooting Star Nursery has some native plants. There's some places you can get native seeds, Klamath Siskiyou native seeds. So there's some ways we can get natives. We can't always find all the natives we really want for commercial purchase, but when we can, it's a good idea to plant native. So we get rid of that lawn, remove those invasives and non-natives, plant our natives. And next, reducing our pesticides. We're trying to protect all of these insects, not get rid of them. So time and place, there are some things that are really gnarly that are not native to our area that we might need to use some chemical controls for. I'm thinking emerald ash borer moving in to the area is something that we really don't want to get established. But using more native plants and growing them to be eaten by these caterpillars, we don't have to worry so much about using all of these chemicals because they've kind of got a more balance to them where the plants will survive. They might not look completely pristine with a couple bites taken out of their leaves, but they'll survive and be happy, and the caterpillars will be happy too. And on the times we do need to use some of our sprays, being mindful of what we're using. There's some things that are broad spectrum that are going to impact a lot of different species of insect. And there's some things that are more specified that are just going to hit one target. If you see these neonicotinoids listed, they are systemic pesticides. So that's going to get into the plant and stay in the plant and reach all aspects from the leaves to the petals and the roots. And there's some issues with those being on a plant to hit maybe aphids, but then our pollinators come visit, or maybe some other insects that are caterpillars eating the leaves to grow and become those butterflies that we're accidentally hurting as well, because that's staying in the system of our plant. There's often leaching into our soils, getting off into our water systems. Does anyone do fishing? Any water activities? There's been notice in a lot of streams that their invertebrate populations are declining, and invertebrates are a really good way to show stream health. If we've got a lot of good diversity in our marine invertebrates in our streams, we've got a healthy stream. So trying to protect our ecosystem as a whole, reducing our pesticide use, making sure we're protecting our native insects, both in our gardens and elsewhere in our water systems as well. There's often less of a need for these chemical inputs when we've got our native plants, because again, they evolved alongside our native insects. They're going to be in a more balance. If you're growing food, you know, got to do what you got to do to eat. Some exceptions to this rule. But overall, choosing those native plants for our yards, focusing on those caterpillars and those pollinators. So we get rid of our lawn, we get rid of those invasives, we plant our natives, we reduce our pesticides. Then we can build a pollinator garden, be more intentional about which natives we're planting, build some habitat for beyond our caterpillars. So we've got our bees. Honeybee is one that we're all familiar with. It's not native, but there are so many native bees to North America, and especially the Pacific Northwest. There's so many moths and butterflies. There's things like wasps, flies, beetles, hummingbirds, bats. All of these are pollinators too. So what bees need, what the bees need, pollen for growth, space to live, some of these things. We really need to incorporate this into our designs of our gardens. Like I had with the numbers for showing how many different caterpillar species plants supported, these plants support that number of bee species. Some bees are very generalist pollinators. They can fly around to many different species, families, and beyond groups of plants. But some really need to stick within their niche, whether it's one family of flower, a genus, or sometimes even just one species of plant that bee is reliant upon. So if we plant a mixture of these natives in our gardens, we're going to be able to support multiple species of bees with just a few different varieties of plants. The generalists will be fine. So if we focus on planting for our specialists, we're going to be supporting those generalists as well. So they're going to be non-native and our native bees going to be using those pollens to feed their young. And our butterflies as well, when they're going on their journey, going to need to build up that strength in the fall for that long migration. So we need to be thinking about seasonality too, making sure we've got blooms, spring, summer, fall, throughout the entire season that these pollinators are going to be active. Because sometimes we've got a warm spring, if bees come out because they think it's warm, maybe not much is blooming yet. There are some early blooming things like willows, maples that we can plant to provide for that gap that they might be facing and having food. And some late season things like asters and goldenrod to hit that end of the season gap they may be facing in food. Thinking of our plant families, we've got the carrot family, those nice little compound umbels full of teeny flowers. Fennel is there with an asterisk because it is invasive. Our mustard family with those racemes of small cup-shaped flowers. Those are going to be great for some of our pollinators with small mouths, some of our flies. Whoop. Asters with that composite flower. So in that center, it's going to have a lot of little teeny flowers all clustered together, provide a lot of different pollen there for them. And our mint family, oregano again, like fennel, is invasive in our area, so being mindful with our food. And not forgetting about our grasses. A lot of gardeners forget about grasses in their design. They want flowers, they want pretty, and they forget about some of the evergreen things that are more boring, but they have a lot of importance. If you want skipper butterflies, they need these grasses to feed on and lay their eggs in. So when you can, choose native plants for your yards, especially when we're thinking about pollinators. And being mindful not to choose cultivars that are going to negatively impact our pollinators. So we've got some things that are different color, either different colored flowers or different colored leaves. Some studies have shown that the purple leaves, whenever the native is green, are less attractive to some insects on feeding. It's got some different composition to it. And when our flowers become double blossomed, that one, like for the echinacea, that takes the reproductive parts of the flower, so the pollen producing parts, and it changes them into additional petals. So it's not going to produce as much pollen. There's not going to be as many seeds produced. So you're not going to be feeding the pollinators or the birds anything that's going to rely on those seeds. So when we can, sticking to our straight natives, maybe if something's really beautiful, that can be your central focal, and then get some other natives around it to get that 70% mix of natives. So like I had mentioned, that long period of bloom time from beginning of the season to the end of the growing season. Gonna need a mix of some of those shrubs, trees, annuals, perennials. And maybe you've got a large yard, you can put all of this in. Maybe you can collaborate with some of your neighbors and say, hey, I found this plant that's beautiful. It would be great in your yard. By the way, it's native. So having food, having those nesting spaces for our native bees, they're gonna need a lot of pollen to reproduce. And we've got, some of the studies have now shown about 800 in Oregon. We used to think it was 600, but some of the, master metallurgists have been doing a lot of work finding and surveying for new bee species. They're gonna need somewhere to nest and put that pollen so they can feed their young. They nest in the ground, most of them, 70% of our native bees nest in the ground. They'll nest inside woody stems, pithy stems, hollow stems, stems of plants in general. An example of some pithy stem getting in there, all those chambers, they've stuffed their egg and a bunch of pollen for their larvae to feed on. Some of our woody stems, like our mason bees, clog up those holes, get a bunch of pollen in there for their young to feed on. Leafcutter bees, the wool carder bees, using all different materials from our plants to get their structures for their nests. And then our little ground nesting bees popping up out of there. They often will go for open soil. So if we have a heavy layer of mulch, dense layer of plants, they're not going to have an open spot to dig and build their nest into the ground. And we've got all of these lovely bee hotels, bee houses, and they look really good, but a caution. We need to be cleaning those and maintaining them properly if we're going to put them up. They're gonna concentrate all of these bees into one location. So that's a great target for any of the pests to hit and have a lot of food. All of those parasites and predators. So they need to be maintained, cleaned, and cared for. So like I had mentioned, concentrated disease, this is a bee that is full of mites and you can't even see the yellow or the black stripes on them. So when we have native plants out in the landscape, it's going to spread out our bees. They're going to nest in different sites, so the parasites won't be as concentrated, and that's also going to help our bees. So we remove our lawn, we remove our invasives, we plant our natives, we minimize our pesticides, we make that pollinator garden. Then we can leave the leaves. So a lot of moths and caterpillars eat those dead fallen leaves, that fungi that decompose the leaves, some of that lichen. We often call it leaf litter, but it's not really litter. It's providing an important habitat and resource for our caterpillars and some beetles as well. So it's important that we leave the leaves. Now, if your leaves are against your house, just rake them into a garden bed away, because we don't want that flammable material near our structures. So there's ways we can leave the leaves, but also be mindful of our fiery landscape. So all of these beautiful ones need some time in the soil, whether it's the hawk moth that pupates into that leaf litter, or the mourning cloak that as an adult will go down into the leaf litter and overwinter. So again, leaving those leaves, leaving that habitat for all of the stages of our pollinator's life. Also helps with our flies. Fly larvae, like caterpillars, soft, squishy, easy for birds to eat. They're going to be in that vegetation as well. So leaving the leaves and having those critical food sources available over that winter time. Some of our other flies that are going to be doing some great things for us, feeding on those aphids and thrips, those annoying pests. They're going to also need some of that leaf litter habitat. And as pollinators, syrphid flies are a family. Nope. Yes, they're a family of fly. Fly is the order of insect. They're a family of fly that as larvae, they're going to be eating aphids, thrips, all of those guys we don't want in our garden. And as adults, they're really good pollinators. They hover around and get a lot of those shallow cut flowers, like the parsley family, those brassicas. When we leave the leaves, we can also leave our stems. Those seed heads will provide food. Some of the birds that need that nesting material, some of that tough. And as well as on the left-hand side, that is a bird going for some wasps in a gall. So we're providing food habitat for our bees and birds by leaving these things up in the winter, and then late spring, once it's warm and insects have completed their overwintering, they're moving on. That's a better time to cut these down and maintain our garden. So just thinking about how we garden a little bit differently, leaving those stems, leaving those seed heads. If it is possible on your property, leaving a fallen log can provide a lot of habitat to a lot of different creatures. Not always feasible for everyone on where they're at and what dryness level their properties are and whatever flammable things are around them. But it can be a great way to provide habitat for a lot of different organisms. So leaving those leaves, getting that water, cover, nesting sites, food for all of those organisms. So moving half our lawn, removing those invasives, planting our natives, minimizing pesticides, making a pollinator garden, leaving the leaves, and finally turning out the lights. So migratory birds, I saw a lot of posts this past year when they were flying over of turn out your lights, these dates, be sure that we're being mindful of our migrating birds. Our nighttime pollinators, our moths, getting attracted to those lights and passing away before they do all their pollinator services. So there's some options, switching to motion sensor lights. Oftentimes, I know my mom was always, we need to have the outside light on. And I'm like, Mom, we have a street light that's always on. Why do we need our porch light on? So there's some ways that we can transition to motion sensor or yellow LED lights to be a little friendlier on our pollinators if you do have to have a light going on every night. So removing our lawn invasives, planting our natives, minimizing our pesticide, making a pollinator garden, leaving the leaves, turning out the lights. Some of these you can do out of order. Do what's manageable for you, but taking these steps to save nature that we have to live with. And we are part of nature too, we're animals. So doing our work, doing our part to, you know, save the world. The very easy step, moving towards making us native again. So Lynn does have this, and I also have this, and I'm able to share it out. If anyone wants a PDF copy or whatever, and there's a lot of sources that were used, a lot of Tallamy and information on birds. So yes, thank you. If anyone has questions.
Does anybody have any questions?
Did you get the email for getting presentation again?
Oh, I went the wrong way.
Put that QR code up there. I think, is that what you mean? Yeah, the handout that had the QR code, that handout, the one I put up at the beginning?
That handout was
Yeah. Is that the one you wanted?
No.
The entire PowerPoint, is this got,
I don't think we have a QR code for the PowerPoint. In fact,
it's not a QR code, but it's Lynn's email. If you need to get her email.
Questions.
So are there any other questions in the room or questions in the Zoom, Willard?
I'm trying to pull up the.
Is that it?
I had a question about the mock orange. I know it's native back east, but is it out here too?
Yes.
Yeah, there are some
There
natives.
is a native species here.
Yeah, so it's being careful when we go to nurseries and we ask for mock orange. We don't know which mock orange they're going to give us. But if we come in knowing what species of mock orange is native to our area, we can say, I want this mock orange, and double check, making sure we're getting the natives for our area.
Thanks, Grace. Can you make sure Zoom can also hear you when you answer the questions?
Sorry, I was too
We kind of
far
heard
away.
that. It wasn't bad.
Okay.
The Calscape has a really good website for things that grow in your area. And so if you just go kind of to Northern California, unfortunately, they don't cross the border into Oregon, but it will give you like a list, and then you can kind of look at that, copy down some of the species, and then when you're going, we have a resource pinned to the top of the Facebook page that has native plant nurseries where you can go around, but our native Lewisii is the species that we have here, and that is available in nurseries.
So would you use my reason on Housecape for a horn?
Would I? Would I? I don't.
For plants, I use Housecape all the time.
Yeah, that's what I do. I just put a pin right, you know, and even though things really change over in California, but I also know what grows here, but
Right.
it's gonna be close. Yeah.
I would just say also on the light thing, there's a program out there, Dark Sky Initiative, and they provide some certifications on certain light fixtures if you're buying for your home with their night sky. I don't really know the details.
Well, that's cool to look into. So Dark Sky Initiative can provide, what is it, details on light fixtures to see if they're good enough quality for protecting our pollinators and migratory birds. We have a question if the online resources will also be posted to the email. And
We can do that.
yeah, and you can send out the presentation too to everyone
Okay.
through the email. That might just be easier so everyone make sure they get a copy. Yeah.
Another reason you don't want to plant non-natives. California, they planted the plane tree, which is not native.
It is hybridizing the California species. And now the nurseries are going up into the Sierra Nevada to get their seed to make sure there's no pollen contamination. And it happened here along Bear Creek. We have the Heinz walnut, which is native. All of the other walnuts are very promiscuous. Have hybridized into that. We did DNA research coming up along Bear Creek, found out there was 2 or 3 different hybrid situations in there in some of those trees.
Yeah,
So that is really problematic.
that is a really good point of the hybridization from those non-natives.
Get on to them out of the extension office. I said, you're planting those damn hybrid poplars along the roadways and every place else. Where do you think that pollen's gonna go?
Mhm.
Into the riparian areas with our native plants. So you have all kinds of problems with pollen contamination.
Mhm.
So keep the non-native herd out of the.
Yeah, so like pollen doesn't float in on
Right.
wind or bees or whatnot and get our natives
Yeah,
with that
you can go
other.
for 10, 15, 20 miles. I
Mhm.
mean, it's crazy. But we don't pay any attention to that.
Right, just more reasons to plant natives.
Yeah, and talking about pesticides and herbicides and things like that. I'm a Vietnam vet. I came back from Vietnam. I was affected with Agent Orange. In Vietnam, a friend of mine visited there about 2 years ago. The forest is still dead. There's no life coming up from the floor of the forest. So they killed off all the bacterial assemblage there. This is a dead forest and we don't know for how long.
Mhm.
But at the time, it was just an experiment, knock the leaves off the trees so we could see the enemy. Well, now we're paying a heavy.
Yeah.
price.
Yeah,
And the problem is, we don't know how to clean it up.
yeah, there's a lot of those situations where
Right.
now we know that this thing we tried did not work well at all. It
No,
was really bad for the environment, which is unfortunate. Oh, they're posting links in the chat for people for dark sky and whatnot, so that's good.
All right, any other questions? Online, last chance. Okay, no more questions.
Thank you all for
Well,
having
thank you.
me. Grace.